and the world. Compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
The news comes to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories. With the news at this time, I am Deanna Jordan. A very good morning to you. First, the lead stories. The People's National Congress Reform has discarded a motion by a party group in West Berbice for the removal of Joseph Harmon from the National Assembly. President Irfan Ali says that 1,000 houses are to be built using 100% local wood. Firefighters and police are trying to determine the cause of yesterday's fire at another wharf in Georgetown. In regional news, Antiguans and Barbudans are expected to go to the polls this year. Colombia wants to assist CARICOM in a number of areas. And for the international news, we'll bring to you the latest bulletin from the BBC World Service. The details of these and other stories will be coming up right here in just a moment.
A COVID-19 PCR test is now mandatory for many routine activities, including travel and return to work purposes. At Eureka, our trained and experienced staff will ensure confidentiality while your test is conducted in a professional and timely manner, with results in just 48 hours. So the next time you require an efficient and hassle-free PCR COVID-19 test, call 624-8378, 608-8378, or 623-7233 to schedule your appointment. You can also ask about our house call testing service.
And now the news in detail. The People's National Congress Reform's Central Executive Committee, CEC, on Sunday by a majority refused to consider a motion for the removal of Mr. Joseph Harmon from the National Assembly. The aim had been to make way for party leader Aubrey Norton to become Guyana's opposition leader, despite a stout official denial by that party. The sources said 31 out of 35 CEC members spoke about the motion, while the others remained silent, and in the end they decided not to act on the document that originated from a PNCR group in West Coast Berbice. Demerara Waves News Talk Radio Guyana was informed that the motion, which had originally contained 4 names, was subsequently amended to focus on only one person. The PNCR, however, in an official statement, referred to a list of MPs and 4 of its MPs in describing media reports to that effect as a total fabrication. That party went on to say that no such motion has been submitted by Region Number 5 and no such motion has been discussed at the party's Central Executive Committee meeting on Sunday. That the sources said that PNCR leader would this week hold discussions with 9 PNCR-aligned parliamentarians of the opposition coalition of a Partnership for National Unity plus Alliance for Change to convince at least one of them to resign. If he succeeds, the sources say this will make way for him to be formally picked to become a parliamentarian and then go on to be elected by a majority of the opposition parliamentarians as opposition leader. 1,000 houses are to be built using 100% local wood. President Irfan Ali says the aim is to provide affordable homes to Guyanese. He says the project forms a part of the value added to the government's housing program. This year, over $12 billion has been allocated for continued infrastructural development works in housing schemes. The works will include the upgrading of more than 45 kilometers of roads in 31 existing housing areas across regions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, and 10. Guyana now has 11,527 active COVID-19 cases. The Ministry of Health says they include 203 who are hospitalized. 16 of them are very sick and are receiving intensive care. The Health Ministry also says that there are 353 new cases. Doctors have ordered 11,324 persons to isolate themselves at home as they can easily spread the virus that has killed 1,166 persons in Guyana so far. Dating back to March 2020, when the first case was detected in Guyana, 59,803 persons have been tested positive. Those who have recovered so far total 47,094. Police and firefighters are today continuing their investigations into a fire that destroyed a building at the Guyana National Shipping Corporation GNSC wharf on Lombard Street. The fire service says a workshop and gear room, which were housed in the same building on the premises, were destroyed on Sunday morning. Fire Chief Gregory Wickham says a fireman aboard the fireboat spotted the smoke and called for help. The Fire Prevention Department is slated to conduct fire prevention inspections later this week with the GNSC. The Guyana Fire Service says this will be done with the aim of putting ample passive and active fire suppression systems in place to prevent and reduce the outbreak of fires at these facilities. Meanwhile, Minister of Home Affairs says that the business community and the wider public need to be on greater alert.
We perhaps have to work harder at getting the message across, in spite of the fact that we've had serious fires of recent. All right.
What is your word of advice at this point in time, given the two fires in close proximity?
Well, I can only repeat what is in front of us, what is happening fairly regularly now. The fact that we have to pay more attention to issues relating to fire safety and to protecting the personal property, private businesses, and also public buildings.
This is the second fire in recent weeks at the city wharf. The first was at the GNIC wharf that housed the Park and Bond and the customs operations there. The Guyana Police Force says that 71 illegal guns were taken off the streets last year. That law enforcement agency says that those guns had been in the hands of criminals. Official figures also show that 9 illegal guns have been recovered so far for this year. Police announced the number of guns recovered last year, while reporting that a 22-year-old man was arrested allegedly with an unlicensed .32 pistol, 1 magazine, and 2 live rounds of ammunition in his possession. According to police, the man was arrested on Sunday during an operation at Hammerhead Street, Caneville, East Bank, Demerara. Investigators are expected to question him about a series of armed robberies in Georgetown. And now in regional news. Antigua and Barbuda's Prime Minister Gaston Brown says elections will be held this year. He made this announcement on his radio station, Point FM, at the weekend. Mr. Brown says his Antigua and Barbuda Labour Party is aiming to defeat the opposition United Progressive Party by a landslide.
I want the people of Antigua and Barbuda to know, especially those who support us and our well-wishers, that is all 17 seats we're going for next election. We must rip UP's next elections.
The United Progressive Party has already launched its election campaign. Colombian President Ivan Duque says his government will establish a regional solidarity fund to serve the population in health and in case of natural disasters. He made those remarks during the second ministerial summit of the Caribbean Community in Barranquilla. The meeting focused on economic reactivation, health, climate change, and gender equality. Belize's Foreign Minister, Eamon Courtenay, who chairs the CARICOM Council, as well as Secretary General Carla Barnett, attended the meeting. The Colombian leader told the CARICOM delegation that his country wants to strengthen the bond of cooperation on security. The Barranquilla meeting reviewed the agreements signed in Cartagena de Indias on June 29, 2019. The Colombian president also expressed concern that natural disasters and vaccination against COVID-19, in addition to economic and social security reactivation. He added that once his country starts producing vaccines against the new coronavirus disease, COVID-19, in the next 12 months, he hoped that Colombia and the CARICOM could have a partnership. A seismologist at the Seismic Research Unit of the University of the West Indies says Trinidad and Tobago is not expected to face more serious earthquakes. He gave the assurance after last Saturday's quake between the islands of Trinidad and Tobago. Details from this TTT News Online report.
Lead seismologist of the Seismology Unit of the UWI's Seismic Research Center, Dr. Rodrigo Contreras, confirms Saturday's incident was not the first for this week.
The first two events of the week, they were felt, but not as widely as the one. The magnitudes were actually larger than the one, but they were located in an area a little bit farther from the island.
He says the quake was located between the islands of Trinidad and Tobago.
There is no evidence that something larger will come. Maybe we will feel some shakings, but there is no evidence that something will produce like buildings to collapse and stuff like that.
Dr. Cantera says many persons commented on Saturday morning's event via the center's Facebook page, but he urged them to fill out the felt earthquake form on the site instead, as this will allow the center to gather more accurate data on the earthquake. Terry Ann Brown Campbell, TTT News.
And now in Barbados, 3 hospital units should be up and running soon in order to assist the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in its daily operations. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Kenneth George says Barbados's main hospital operations had been impacted at several levels due to the COVID-19 pandemic and surge in cases. He says the sites are intended to provide care and support for individuals who are either ill or moderately ill. He explained that the areas are carefully selected based on their ability to manage patients. The Barbados Chief Medical Officer urged persons in home isolation to fully cooperate with health authorities because they are deemed contagious. The appointment of a St. Lucian as Managing Director of the British Virgin Islands Airport Authority, BVIAA, has raised concerns about whether no islander could have been hired instead. BVI Premier Andrew Foy, however, says that of the more than 60 applications, none of them was from a Virgin Islander. Premier Foy says he requested information regarding the hiring process from the Airport Authority since it was a corporate body. He says he was told that the Airport Safety Support International also played a critical role in the hiring process. Foy said the perception going around is that his government brought in a St. Lucian to take a post that they are not looking out for the people of the Virgin Islanders. However, the Premier said the government cannot put someone in a position for which they have not applied. The Premier said the current Managing Director, Kurt Mennel, who officially commenced his duties on Monday, is on a 4-year contract with the view of training persons. Consequently, Foy noted, when Mennel's tenure is completed, someone from the Virgin Islands can take the post. The Premier says it is unfair for the public to give the impression that most of the top positions in the public sector are not made up of locals. And now for the international news, here's the latest bulletin coming from the BBC World Service.
BBC News. Hello, this is Jerry Smith. The United Nations has warned of a deepening humanitarian crisis in Myanmar, a year after the military seized power. A spokesman for the Secretary-General said the overthrow of the elected government has resulted in intensifying violence and a rapid rise in poverty. A senior human rights official, James Roadhaver, told the BBC that popular resistance was continuing despite the use of military weaponry, and most of the opposition remained peaceful. He said the people of Myanmar needed protection from violence.
Every time we say that the situation can't get worse, it seems to do so. You have a human rights catastrophe in the country that has been brought on by this seizure of the military of power. And it's produced daily human rights violations, which has then led to humanitarian crisis, economic fallout, and a deepening political crisis in the country, and it has its own spillover effects.
The United Nations Security Council is due to meet later today at the request of the United States to discuss the build-up of Russian troops along its border with Ukraine. The US ambassador to the UN said Russia's actions posed a threat to international peace and security. However, Russia's deputy UN ambassador said the allegations were baseless and expressed the hope that other council members would not support what he described as a shameful public relations stunt. A UN report says the Taliban and its allies are alleged to have killed scores of former Afghan officials and security forces members since they seized power in August. The report by the Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, said there had been credible allegations of enforced disappearances and killings. Here's Ambar Sanetirajan.
The UN chief said the violations were happening despite a general amnesty declared by the Taliban for those who worked for the previous Afghan leadership. The report also highlighted the continuing attacks on rights groups and the media. Mr. Guterres has recommended that the Security Council approves a restructuring of the UN mission to Afghanistan and the creation of a special unit to monitor human rights. The Taliban have rejected the report and say they have investigated and punished those who have carried out acts of personal revenge. The leaders have repeatedly urged their followers to respect the amnesty.
Portugal's governing Socialist Party has won an outright parliamentary majority in Sunday's snap general election. Celebrating the surprise result, the Prime Minister, Antonio Costa, said an absolute majority did not mean absolute power or governing alone. From Lisbon, Alison Roberts.
Antonio Costa hailed his resounding win as a victory of confidence and for stability after an election triggered when his second term as Prime Minister was cut short with the defeat of his draft budget for 2022. While the Socialists were the night's biggest victors, handily beating the centre-right Social Democrats, two other parties on the right saw a surge in support.
BBC News. Rwanda has reopened its border with Uganda as relations between the two countries improve. Kigali closed the crossing at Katuna 3 years ago when it accused Uganda of abducting its citizens and supporting rebels seeking to topple President Paul Kagame. Last week, the influential son of the Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni met Mr. Kagame. The head of the Philippine Electoral Commission has filed her opinion to the Supreme Court on a disqualification case affecting the presidential aspirant Bongbong Marcos. Rowena Guanzon says Mr. Marcos, the son of the former dictator Ferdinand Marcos, has failed to file tax returns. From Manila, here's Howard Johnson.
Commissioner Guanzon says Bongbong Marcos should be disqualified from running for president because he was twice convicted by courts in the Philippines over his failure to file tax returns while he was a regional politician. The Commissioner's allegations about undue influence on the case raise questions about the incorruptibility of the Election Commission and the separation of powers in the Philippines. Bongbong Marcos's lawyer says his client meets all the qualifications to run and that there are no serious moral issues with his failure to file tax returns.
The Australian military has confirmed that its largest warship, HMAS Adelaide, suffered a power failure while anchored near Tonga. Sources quoted by the Australian broadcaster ABC say the ship was stranded for a period of time because of a total power failure. The ship had been delivering humanitarian assistance to Tonga. The English Premier League football club Brentford have signed the Danish midfielder Christian Eriksen, who suffered a cardiac arrest during a match at Euro 2020 last June. The 29-year-old will join Brentford on a 6-month deal until the end of the season. Since he collapsed while playing for Denmark last summer, Christian Eriksen has been fitted with an implanted cardioverter defibrillator. BBC News.
The news came to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories.
Don't let the fear of contracting the coronavirus disease deter you from seeking the medical care you need. At Eureka Labs, we ensure the safety of our clients and staff with our rigid sanitization routine. This involves the use of ultraviolet lights to effectively rid the air and all surfaces of viruses and bacteria that may be present throughout the lab daily. The light works to rapidly inactivate microorganisms through a physical process that is invisible to human eye. So the next time you need a checkup, don't hesitate to give us a call on 225-7574 to schedule your appointment.
And now here's a recap of the leads. The People's National Congress Reform has discarded a motion by a party group in West Berbice for the removal of Joseph Harmon from the National Assembly. President Irfan Ali says that 1,000 houses are to be built using 100% local wood. Firefighters and police are trying to determine the cause of yesterday's fire at another wharf in Georgetown. And in regional news, Antiguans and Barbudans are expected to go to the polls this year. Colombia wants to assist CARICOM in a number of areas. And that's the news at the moment.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.